Flow, the antidote to boredom. Boredom. We have all experienced it. Maybe some of you opened this episode simply because you had nothing better to do with your time. Isn't it amazing, however, that even though we've experienced boredom countless times in our lives, most of us still don't know why it happens and how to avoid it? Also, think about it. Why is it so that certain activities like playing sports and dancing with your friends almost every time guarantees enjoyment, whereas many day-to-day activities end up being such a passionless and lifeless bore? While we rarely contemplate such questions, enjoyment, fortunately, is one of the most meticulously researched subjects in psychology. After decades of research, psychologists have discovered that enjoyment is not a random event that magically appears and disappears from our lives. Instead, it can be deliberately cultivated if we understand the factors involved. Many people around the world who live very interesting and engaging lives intuitively understand this secret. In fact, as you will find out in this episode, enjoyment is a key ingredient to any kind of work that becomes a lifelong passion. In this episode, I'm going to discuss what really lies at the heart of enjoyment and how we can structure an activity to derive more enjoyment from it. I don't know if you've ever bothered to notice, but the normal state of mind for most people is chaos. My father, for example, whenever not occupied by work, is always busy in doing some menial housework. In a conversation we once had, I asked him why he doesn't stop to take some rest from all these activities even when on holiday. And he said to me that if he stopped, he wouldn't know how to spend his time. This underlying restlessness, however, is not exclusive to my father. Most people, when at last are unburdened by their professional demands on a weekend or a holiday, discover to their dismay that they don't really know what to do with their time. Restless with nothing to do, they at last resort to their television screens, get hooked to their social apps, engage in mindless gossip, or distract themselves with the pleasures of the body, like food, sex, or sleep. Others, when they are free, smoke packs of cigarettes, chew tobacco, and intoxicate themselves with various mind-altering substances. Without the ability to create healthy ways of enjoyment, most people end up wasting their cherished free time by drifting into randomness, distraction, and obscurity. In fact, this restlessness that we feel when there is no external demand imposed on us is so common that psychologists have a term for it. They call it psychic disorder. And if it doesn't sound healthy, it's because it's not. In India too, we have a phrase called Khali Dimag Shaitan Ka Ghar, which means that a mind that is free is a home to devil, and is also used to allude to this tendency of our anxious minds to engage in mindless activities just in order to pass time. I'm sure that this corona pandemic gave many of us ample free time to discover this imbalance within ourselves that usually goes unnoticed. But what then, you may ask, can be done about it? On one hand, there is this restlessness when there's nothing much to do. On the other hand, there are petty amusements that are available to cope up with it. But merely filling your time with anything that is available is not enjoyment. The reason people become dependent on television, drugs, and social trends to cause excitement in their lives is because they have so little of themselves to fall back on. There is a way, however, to spend your time doing things that actually leads to healthy enjoyment. But to understand it, we will have to look into the nature of enjoyment itself. Contrary to the popular belief, enjoyment is quite different from pleasure. Enjoyment is experienced as is discovered and confirmed by psychologists by studying thousands of individuals when our attention is unusually grounded in the present moment. When an activity is so exhilarating and demanding that it involves you to the exclusion of everything else, you experience these profound states of enjoyment. Psychologists call these states psychic order or flow. These flow states are so blissful, in fact, and so internally rewarding that people go to great lengths just for the sheer sake of experiencing them. When in flow, the person forgets all his problems, temporarily loses a sense of identity, and feels a sense of unity with whatever he or she is engaged in. Let me try to show you flow instead of just talking about it. Here's a man trying to break the world record for the most number of keystrokes in a minute. Notice the level of concentration involved in this task. Here's Messi in flow. Notice that even though he's barging towards the goal, he's still in perfect control of the ball. Here's an Olympic ice skater, Yulia, in flow.
Quite incredible.
Here's a singer, Katie Lang, in flow. Note that in all these examples, even though the task at hand is not easy, the person is really enjoying what he or she is doing. In fact, as you can see, even the people are pumped up just to watch them perform. What is being enjoyed by these performances, however, is not the applaud of the audience, but the extreme involvement, the complete investments of one's attention in the task at hand. There is no attention left to think about the troubles of everyday life. In fact, no attention left even to think about oneself. In these flow states, you become completely one with what you're doing. Here's how a chess player describes it. You're so completely absorbed that the roof could fall, and if it misses you, you would not even notice it. In flow, this laser-sharp focus is also accompanied by a complete control of the task at hand. Like a mountaineer explains, when you're climbing, you're not aware of other problematic life situations. It becomes a world into its own, significant only to itself. It's a concentration thing. Once you're into the situation, it's incredibly real, and you're very much in charge of it. It becomes your total world. Moreover, in spite of being in total control, people report that they don't really have to exert any effort or willpower. They are just in a sense flowing, as if by magic. Here's how a dancer describes it. A strong relaxation and calmness comes over me. I have no worries of failure. What a powerful and warm feeling it is. I want to expand, to hug the world. I feel enormous power, as if moved by grace and beauty. The important thing to understand here is the key to enjoyment is the groundedness of attention in the present moment. In the case of flow activities, the demands of a challenge works to keep us engaged with what is happening right now. In a football game, for example, players have to pay attention to the ball and be extremely alert and aware of the positions of other players. Jugglers are aware that even a momentary lapse in attention can lead to bad performance. A boxer may be knocked out if he doesn't see his opponent's uppercut coming. The pianist will miss the right note if he allows himself to be distracted. Therefore, an activity which has all the ingredients for enjoyment will inevitably demand a constant investment of attention. In fact, this is how enjoyment is different from pleasure. Watching TV, browsing social apps, gossiping, or smoking may be pleasurable for many, but these activities almost never demand any serious investment of attention, and as a result, never lead to flow states or any kind of inner growth. The thing is that we grow up believing that what matters most will happen in future. But as we have seen, the secret to flow lies in the present moment. We think that happiness and enjoyment are a fruit of external forces. But if enjoyment fundamentally depends upon the ability to pay attention, like we just discussed, then the key to it has got to be in our own hands. The reason this must be the case is because attention can only be directed from within. So you might be forced by people or circumstances to do a job, but nobody can force you to pay attention. So whether you will enjoy your work or hate it will entirely depend upon your willingness to pay attention and your ability to find opportunities for flow. By this time, you may be convinced that these flow states are real, but from what I've said so far, some of you might have made an impression that flow is restricted to highly skilled individuals. The thing is that somehow some people are able to find flow at a relatively young age, and because it relates their subjective experience like flow states do, they naturally, as any human being would, devote most of their time to that activity and as a result become highly skilled. When they grow up, their accumulated skills turn them into successful individuals, but if you ask them, at the heart of their drive would just be flow. The reason they were working so hard was simply because it was a source of great enjoyment to them. The problem is that for most people, the normal day-to-day tasks at home or even at work rarely demand unusual levels of involvement to create flow experiences. So most people stay oblivious of this enormous potential for enjoyment that is available to human beings. Moreover, our schools, colleges, and workplaces are designed so poorly that they fail miserably to provide flow, even though, as we discussed a moment ago, flow is the key to becoming highly skilled. Skill, nevertheless, is just a byproduct of flow. In fact, anyone with whatever level of skill can experience flow given he finds the right kind of challenge. So if institutions no longer provide us with the right opportunities, we must learn how to create those opportunities for enjoyment ourselves. That being said, let me show you how we can do that. Conditions for flow. The first condition for flow is a challenge. A challenge need not come from outside sources though. In fact, you can find or create your own challenges. Without the right challenges, however, life tends to become dull and boring. Tribal people in Colombia, for example, believe that with time, the world becomes too predictable and the challenge starts to fade from life. Without challenge, they believe, life has no meaning. So after every 25 years or so, the entire tribe moves to a new location. And there they find challenge. Again they build their entire village from scratch, find new sources of food, and everyone feels rejuvenated and healthy. In hardcore Buddhist monasteries, on the other hand, where there's a lot less freedom of movement, challenge is imbued in every little day-to-day task. There are entire rituals for eating food, for drinking tea, for cleaning the toilets, and even for just sitting. And the moment the trainees begin to feel like they've mastered them, the senior monks change the rituals. A challenge, therefore, is crucial to avoid falling back to the anxiety that we face when life becomes routine and boring, and also one of the most important aspects of creating flow. The second condition for flow is a rule-bound system. That is, a system of action which has some rules of engagement. Every sport, every game has some rules that limit the actions of the players. In fact, without rules, it is not possible to enjoy any game. But rules are not just exclusive to games. Learning how to drive a car has rules. Learning how to sing or play a guitar has rules. Learning how to cook food has rules. Even learning algebra, there are certain steps you must go through. Without such rules, you wouldn't know what to do next. Rules help us direct attention from one thing to the next. So if the challenge or the activity that you've chosen in step 1 is not limited by any parameters, it will be difficult to pay attention and therefore to experience flow. The third condition for flow is relevant skills. If you don't even know the basics of playing a piano, for instance, and you try to play an entire piece of music, you're not going to be able to enjoy yourself. On the other extreme, if you are an Olympic runner, you're not going to enjoy taking part in a children's race. You need to find challenges that match your current skills. The point here is not to prove yourself or to win a trophy, but simply to enjoy yourself. So no matter what your age or profession, you have to be honest about the skills you currently have for a certain kind of challenge, and then choose the right challenge that perfectly matches your current level of skills. Note that flow doesn't happen to highly skilled individuals alone, but to the individuals whose skills are perfectly matched with the task at hand. So every man or woman has equal access to flow, given he or she has the relevant skills for the challenge at hand. The fourth condition for flow is concentration. Many people believe that starting a new hobby will guarantee enjoyment, but enjoyment doesn't depend upon what you do, but rather on how you do it. This is important to mention because you don't just have to pay attention to the task once and then forget it, but keep paying attention to it again and again. In fact, if you choose the right challenge, it will demand exactly that from you. So before you even begin, choose the challenge that you will be entrusted to pay attention to be completely involved with. The fifth and probably the most important condition for flow is feedback. You need to find a way to monitor your progress. This is crucial because if you don't know whether what you're doing is the right thing or not, whether what you intend to create is being created or not, it becomes difficult to keep paying attention. When every step you take can be monitored and adjusted, when every step you take tells you that you're moving in the right direction, then what you're doing right now becomes the goal itself. This is how you become more and more immersed in the task. The sixth and the last condition for flow is raising the bar. Any decent challenge usually has unlimited space for improvement. You may experience flow from a certain activity, but with time and exposure, your skills will increase and the challenge will not seem much of a challenge anymore. So in order to keep experiencing flow from an activity, you need to keep increasing the difficulties of the challenge, to keep raising the bar little by little, to keep adding more complexity to the task. This is in fact how skills are indirectly cultivated through flow activities. You're just trying to enjoy yourself and as a result become more skilled. Okay, so these were the conditions for flow. Now before we part, I want to mention that flow is not as far-fetched as it may seem. In fact, you've probably experienced it many times in your lives. We all experience it in mild forms when we play games, dance, read a good novel, or engage in an interesting conversation. You've probably noticed how swiftly and easily time passes in these situations. The reason I made this episode, however, is to show you that it is possible to cultivate flow deliberately, and that if we understand how to do that, we can potentially transform both our work and our leisure into enjoyable experiences. So instead of waiting for these rare moments of enjoyment to occur accidentally, why not endeavor to create them ourselves? If flow is a seldom visitor in your life, if you're constantly bored and often engaged in mindless pleasures, then trust me, you will significantly benefit from harnessing this potential. The thing is that human beings are not happier when they invest more money on fancy entertainments, but when they invest more of themselves. It is by getting involved in an activity that we truly enjoy it. It is no surprise, therefore, that once anyone tastes the joy of flow, by investing oneself in an activity to the limits of one's concentration, one naturally redoubles one's efforts to taste it again and again and again. Alright, so this was all for today. I've summarized the essence of this episode in a document that you can download from the caption below. If you have any questions and queries regarding this episode, then feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. I reply to each and every comment. Also, do share this episode with people who might benefit from it. There are a lot of people who are bored these days, so let's end boredom from as many lives as we can. And thank you for listening to Profundus. This is Rajat, signing off.